My name is Tom Beckstrand, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about me and Speedloads. I was born and raised in small town Nevada. Started shooting at an early age, like most kids do. You can only throw cards in a hat for so long before you get bored, and so shooting became something that I did with my father most frequently. Go out to town dump and start blasting. Went to school at West Point, was commissioned as an infantry officer, and then transitioned later to Special Forces. Started shooting with my father probably around 6 or 7. We've got some old photos that I couldn't find, but it was the old single shot 22, go out to town dump, and bottles, cans, things you get arrested for now. That's how I fell in love. First time I went hunting with my father was near Tabor Creek, which is up in the northeast corner of Nevada, and a lot of walking, I remember, and a little bit of camping, and we didn't see anything, which is hunting. So one of my dad's favorite stories is for Christmas one year, I think I was 12 or 13, I got a new bolt action rifle. 243 is a deer rifle, and while I was sleeping, my father snuck in my room and put it in my gun rack, and he told my mom, "Man, don't worry, Tom won't even see it's there," on Christmas morning. And I came walking out of my room with the rifle in my hands because, as my dad figured out, first thing I did when I woke up in the morning is I looked at the gun rack to make sure everything was there right where I left it. I come from a blue collar family where we had enough, but there wasn't a lot of money laying around, and so, but education was big, and I knew early on that I wouldn't be able to afford the kind of education that I wanted. So when I was about 13 or 14, I started looking hard at the service academies, which, I'm a little bit embarrassed to say it now, but back then it was a means to an end. It was an education that was, one of the best in the country, and that technically was a full scholarship. So that's what got me there. While I was there, I learned to love the military, and I looked forward, once I graduated, to doing Army things. So I got accepted into West Point the summer of '92, and I attended for 2 years, and then I voluntarily separated to go and serve a mission for my church. I was in southern Belgium, northern France for about 2 years, became fluent in French, and reapplied while I was over there, got back in, and graduated with a class of '98, commissioned as an infantry officer. During my senior year at West Point, I decided that if I was going to do Army things, I wanted to do the hardest Army things and see what opportunities would develop from that. So I picked my first assignment as Fort Bragg. That was the 82nd Airborne Division, and coming out of West Point, that's probably one of the better units that you can get into. And the idea was get into the 82nd, try to do a good job there, and then start G2 and figuring out what it would take to make that transition to Special Forces, which I did. Started selection September 9th, 2001. As a young guy, you do something you think it's really hard. Like when I went to West Point, I was like, man, this is really tough. And academically it is. But physically, I thought it was a little bit hard. And then I got into the Army and I went to Ranger School, and I thought, oh Lord, my life has ended. Failed Ranger School the first 2 times because, broken bones, heat stroke, things like that happens. A lot of times guys will talk a little trash. They'll be like, well, are you a summer ranger? Are you a winter ranger? Well, I was a 4 seasons ranger. And I spent 135 days to complete a 61-day program. And that was, a broken foot, bumped me out the first time. I was out for 8 weeks, 6 of which I was in a cast, came back, heat stroke, confined to winter classes, and then I went straight through. But, that was a tough experience for me. And then I went to Special Forces, and that was just a different kind of hard. Ranger School, it's, guys are yelling at you, you don't sleep, you don't eat. Special Forces selection is a little different. No one yells at you, no one talks to you. They just give you heavy things and say, walk that way as fast as you can. We'll tell you when to stop. And maybe you're going a mile and maybe you're going 12 miles. You don't really know. Just go fast. And, or, we'll start walking at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you'll spend 4 hours in the dark and 4 hours in the daytime stumbling around with 45, 50 pounds on your back. And all you have to do to fail is stop, to rest. So it's just hours of you being alone with your pain. And, so it's kind of one of these things. You start off as a young guy, you don't have a lot of experience, and then you get exposed to difficult things, and you're like, man, that's tough. But when you look back, you think, well, it wasn't that bad. And that's kind of, it feels like I spent a large part of my life learning, well, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was, because this is really horrible. So I started selection first, which is kind of tryouts, if you will, for Special Forces, September 9th, 2001. And I remember the day that it happened because they called us all into a big classroom and they said, hey, look, normally you're in isolation. No one, you don't have any contact with the outside world. They said, normally we would never do this, but something big has happened and we have to keep you informed. And they put news clips up on a big screen of just, you know, the carnage, you know, of the day that we were attacked. And I remember thinking, this is some kind of role-playing exercise, you know, they're really stepping up their game. But then at the end they said, hey, look, if anybody's got family that works in the Pentagon or that works in Manhattan, please step outside. You're gonna go call your family members. And to me, that's when I knew it was real. I remember thinking, you know, our nation's going to war. And, you know, I was a young single guy at the time, and you spend all this time training and practicing, and I was worried that I was gonna miss it. And, you know, as my life would later prove, I didn't miss anything. But one thing that I'll always remember and that I'll always appreciate is that America was very different when I got out of selection than when I went in. You know, before we had our problems, and we always got our problems. But when I got out of selection, we were a country united. And that to me was just a wonderful thing to see. So, you know, one of the things that always appealed to me about serving in the Army, of course, is the guns and all the manly things that you get to do. And first got in the 82nd, they said, hey, here's an M4. And I was like, wow, this is the coolest thing ever. And I had an aim point on it. And I was like, man, this is awesome. And this was back before we had high-speed weapon lights. It was take a mag light and some hose clamps and slap that thing on there, and that was Tier 1 Ninja. And then I got into Special Forces, and it really took it up to the next level. I mean, at one point I had an SR-25, which is a semi-auto 308 issued to me. I had a custom-built, you know, an M40X out of a custom shop in Kentucky that was a 308 bolt-action sniper rifle. I had an M4 with a 14.5-inch barrel. I had an M4 with a 10.5-inch barrel. I had a regular Beretta M9. I had a suppressed Beretta M9. I had a Glock 19, and that was just all mine. Well, it was Uncle Sugar's, but he was letting me borrow it. And then, of course, there was ammo. I remember one trip in particular. It was a joint project that we worked on that, you know, Delta Force owned the compound and we were guests there. I was a sniper team leader and it was called a SIF at the time. And we had the bottomless ammo supply point, ASP. And so I would just go over and grab a couple ammo cans of ammo and go to the range. We had a 100-yard range at the edge of our compound and just shoot. And I remember I had my Glock 19 that I was issued, and I had another one that we picked up off a target from a lot of the Iraqis sometimes would moonlight as insurgents or sell their gear. So I had a second Glock 19, and I would just shoot this plate rack until my pistol got so hot I could feel the heat in the frame, and I'd lock the slide to the back, put it on the table, go get my other one, and just keep working the plate rack. And that's where I picked up the habit of always going to the range with two guns so that one can always be cooling down. I got into Special Forces and served on my first team, which is an unconventional warfare team, and then I was able to transition into a sniper team, which is at the time it was called a Commanders in Extremis Force, or SIF for short. And what I liked about that is it really opened up doors to additional training and funding that you can't really find anywhere, even inside Special Forces. I was in third group. You know, I was a sniper team leader, and it's weird because everybody thinks of officers and it's like, well, you know, you sign paperwork and go to meetings and stuff, and that's not really what I wanted to do as an officer. I wanted to go to sniper school. I was a sniper team leader. I needed to have that skill set. But in Special Forces at the time, it was really difficult to get slots, and I didn't want to take one from, you know, one of the enlisted guys on the team, knowing that I would only be there for 2 years if I played all my cards right. So through the help of a friend, Big Tom, he's like my brother. We're still in touch to this day. Reached out to the Marine Corps. They said, absolutely, come on down. And I went to the Scout Sniper Advanced Course in Quantico in early 2006. And it was a phenomenal program. I developed a deep and abiding respect for the Marine Corps, even though I like to give them a hard time. I thought the Scout Sniper community in the Marine Corps is probably one of the best trained and best raw material for special operations. I think that would be the first place I would go to recruit. Anyway, I was fortunate enough. I did well in that program. I was the honor graduate, which means if you've never served, that means you finished first in your class. And I really learned a lot from the guys there. Marine Corps shooters are very disciplined and very talented, and I got to look at their gear, right? They started issuing Schmidt and Bender scopes, which floored me. The Marine Corps didn't have two nickels to rub together, and all of a sudden they're giving every one of their snipers a $3,000 scope. That was an eye-opener. Marines can break anything. They never saw one of their rifles break, which is a Remington 700 and a McMillan stock. And great program, learned a ton. And then of course part of that assignment into the SIF, there's almost like a qualification course you have to go through for that. It's a 2-month CQB program run by Special Forces. CQB is close quarters battle, so it's pistol and carbine and a little bit of shotgun, but the shotgun's used for breaching, so it's a little pistol grip shotgun about that big. Ton of shooting. It's a gentleman's course, but it's very difficult. 56 of us started, 32 finished. 5 officers started, 2 finished. I was fortunate to be one of the survivors. And what I liked about it was a hard standard. It was a very high standard to meet. So you go into a room, there's a bunch of targets. If you miss, that's a spot report. If you shoot a target that you shouldn't have shot, you kill a hostage, that's a spot report. If you don't shoot a target that you should have shot, meaning you're hiding in the back of the stack, that's a spot report. 3 spot reports over the course of 2 months and you're gone. And I finished with no spot reports. That was probably one of the most stressful periods of firearms instruction I ever received in my life, but I carried those lessons. I still load in sequence. If you load incorrectly, spot report, I still load the same way. Unload out of sequence, spot report, I still unload the same way. Freaks people out, but I was very focused, and I still do it that way. And then, a couple of the other shooting schools I was able to do in the Army. I did the Marine Corps high-risk personnel course, which is all plainclothes, concealed carry, about a week long, a lot of shooting, a lot of fun. And then, claim to fame, the Special Operations community uses Todd Hodnett quite a bit, has for years. The first time that any snipers went from 3rd Special Forces Group, I wrote the concept and got it approved, and we took half of my team and half of the other sniper team and went out there for about 3 weeks. It was early 2007. I consider myself to be the most fortunate officer to ever put on a Green Beret because, your typical Special Forces team leader will get 18 to 24 months of team time. And, if he times it right, he'll get 1 combat deployment. If you time it perfectly, you might get 2. I did some finagling, but I was able to spend 51 months on a Special Forces A team as a team leader, and I had 4 combat deployments. Each one was about 5 months long. There was one in 03, one in 04, one in 05, one in 06. The 03 deployment was to Afghanistan. I was a junior captain in the fire base, and I was cherry. You can still see my stem. That was the first trip down range. Super informative and learned a lot. Second trip was right back to the same fire base. I was now the senior captain, and allowed me to really kind of push the limits of unconventional warfare. A lot of times people hear that and they don't really know what that means, but I kind of describe it as like Lord of the Flies with guns. We got there. My mission brief was pretty much, hey man, here's your big chunk of Afghanistan, go find and kill Taliban. High five. And it was a little more detailed than that, but it was super casual, and it was just, hey, like go do the Lord's work. And so we did. And we had a great team of guys, and in fact, there was a couple of operations that went so well that one day we had one of our sources walk into the fire base, and real reliable source, and he said, hey look, the Taliban leadership from Pakistan has called in, and they've put out a $200,000 bounty on Commander Tom, which was me. And it was a great source, so we took it seriously, but guys walk into the fire base and say crazy things all the time, so maybe it's true, maybe it's not. So we write it up, send it up, battalion says, roger that, we got it. But a few days later, it came through someone else's channels because suddenly it was taken very seriously. They said, hey look, this is a legitimate thing, and for those of you who want to check my story, I actually like it when people do that. This was 2004, October 2004 in the Uruzgan province in Afghanistan. And it was all just because we were, like I said, it was a great team. I was getting credit for what the team was doing. first couple of days after it became real, you know, I was working really hard on the outside I'm a steely-eyed freedom fighter, but in the inside, I wanted to clutch my pearls and scream. It's a little bit scary. In fact, I was down at Kandahar a few days later after all this excitement, and I bumped into one of the paramilitary officers from the CIA, and he said, "Hey man, are you the guy with the price on his head?" And I said, "Yeah." He's like, "What's that feel like?" I said, "Well, when I get back to North Carolina, I'm sure it'll be a great story, but right now it kind of sucks." And we had a good laugh about it. And you know, for me, that was kind of a turning point. Was kind of super stressed out, but then I thought, well, it made war personal. And so I thought I should probably work a little harder. And you know, you turn where you can for sources of motivation at times like that. So I had a team hat. Actually, I had this hat, and it's what I wore for that '04 trip. And there was a sew shop right across the street from our battalion where we were at. And I walked over to the booth, and I had them sew 200K on the back of my hat. I thought, well, if there's a price on my head, I might as well put the price on my head. And I wore that for the rest of the trip. And for me, it was, every time I look at my hat, I put it on. I thought, all right, you know, you want it, you come and get it. And it was just a good way for me to focus. After that '04 trip, my battalion commander sat me down. He said, "Hey, you know, you're the most senior team leader in the battalion. You have to move. I have to move you." I said, "Hey, I'd like to go to the SIF." He's a good friend. He still is to this day. He made it happen. Went to the SIF, was a sniper team leader. '05, went downrange to Iraq. And the thing about the SIF is it's a direct action element. And at the time, we were doing all just hits on targets, mostly in Baghdad. Well, there's not a lot of sniper missions when you roll outside the wire. I call it the liquor store holdup, right? You just roll in, blow the doors, run through the place, shoot our guns, pack everything up, and back to the hooch. Not a lot of sniper work there, so I thought, well, if I don't find a job, someone's going to find a job for me. And I did this, you know, I wanted to find where I could serve the best. So I started looking at casualty reports countrywide. And I would look at where Americans were taking the most casualties. And then I went to my commander and I said, "Hey, look, we're taking a lot of casualties here. Obviously, the enemy's there. Why don't I go there and get outside the wire and look around, and maybe there's missions for us." We were working with Iraq's version of Delta Force, ICTF. Probably the best compliment that I ever received in my entire military career was from an Iraqi who is a close friend of mine. We just reconnected not too long ago. He was one of their snipers, and he said, "You know, officers will usually say, 'You go and do.' You're different. You say, 'Come with me.'" And that meant a lot to me. That's the kind of officer I wanted to be. I had a battalion commander who loved the idea. He said, "Yeah, like, man, have at it. Country's yours." And a couple of great operations. So '06, that deployment was a little bit different. That was a big joint project. You know, Delta Force owned the compound, and they had a number of guests. And it was CIA was there, British SAS, us, the SIF, and there was a platoon of Rangers. And the idea was pool resources and just prosecute targets countrywide. And so that was what I did in 2006. That trip was cut a little bit short. When my teammates was killed, a good friend of mine, he's the guy that got me, Tung Nguyen. He got me back shooting competitively again. In fact, '06, right before that trip, we went to the JSOC Small Arms Championship. It was a pistol match, and Tung won the pro class, which was Delta Force and Tung, and then I won the open class, which, you know, it's open and novice, which was everybody else. But so that trip was cut a little short. Came home with Tung, and then '07, early '07, I came out on the promotion list to major, and that means, you know, it's time to have an office. And I didn't want to stay in the Army and have an office, so I got out. You know, when I got out of the Army, you kind of take an inventory of, you know, what was it time well spent, and it was time extremely well spent. I really loved my time in the Army, mostly because of the people I was with, right? It was just great guys, professionals. You know, we were given a dangerous and difficult task, and we accomplished it well. And there's a sense of satisfaction and pride that comes from doing that you can't find any other way. Along the way, you know, I had a gun in my hand and was overseas for a long time, and I learned that less is more. I learned that there's no substitute for quality. Anything that's cheap will break at the worst possible time. Maintenance is a good idea. You don't have to do it all. Don't go overkill, and check everything. You know, don't just assume that, hey, because I have widget X, it's going to work like it's supposed to, until you try it and check it. No. Also, it's not like the movies. When everybody's like super ninja and sneaking through the dark and scaling like the walls of buildings, and there's not even a sound. You guys trip, fall. I had one operation. The guy took a header right into the ditch bank, filled the suppressor with mud, and what we thought was 5 to 8 Taliban was somewhere between 40 to 60. And everyone had a suppressor but him, so guess who sucked up all the incoming fire? He did. We told, after a couple of shots, we're like, you don't get to shoot anymore. You just chill out. So you're gonna trip and fall. You're gonna take a dump. You're probably gonna fall on your rifle. If it's cheap, your optic's gonna break, your mount's gonna break. Don't put too much claptrap on your gun. It's heavy. A rifle, you know, a gun, when you really need it, lives in your hands. Don't make it heavy, unless it's a precision rifle, because precision rifles, when they're heavy, they lay still and they're a lot easier to shoot. Transitioned into the civilian world, stepped into a job as a program manager for a special access program. Those things kind of just pop up when they pop up. Loved the people I worked with. It was a small team of almost all men, and but that was, you know, it was a management thing. It was a management, but a little bit of hands-on. But what that allowed me to do is it gave me some free time. In fact, right when I started, the guy that hired me said, hey, look, this isn't going to be an everyday gig, so if you find something else you like to do, you should do that too. And I kind of fell in the opportunity of writing for gun magazines, and I loved it. I've been doing it ever since. It's coming up on 10 years now. I write for gun magazines. I do some TV and do a little bit of video work too. So, you know, once I left the service and hey, I'm writing about guns, I'm talking about guns, I still like to be involved. And so I started shooting in the Precision Rifle Series. I think that was my first match in 2013. Competed real casually. 2014, 15 and 16, I was hitting it hard. And I loved it. What I learned there is you might be a barrel-chested, steely-eyed freedom fighter, but there's a 50-year-old plumber that is going to absolutely destroy you. The best shooters are 100% American civilians, because that's their thing, right? I don't care if you're a ninja at Delta Force. There's a couple of guys that are really good shooters that compete quite a bit. But look at what you have to do, right? You got PT, you got shooting, you got mission planning. Everybody's like, oh, mission planning, that's what officers do. A bad plan, you were screwed from the start. So learn how to come up with a simple and good one. If a guy that doesn't understand the value of planning is a rookie, but you have to be able to do that. Commo, I mean, there's just like the list of tasks goes on and on. Shooting is just one of those. So when it comes to shooting, a civilian that devotes themselves to that is gonna 100% be the best guy for it. The difference is, with some experience in a combat environment, you learn that decision making, it's not just pulling the trigger, it's when, you know, when to shoot and who do you shoot first. That's a big leap that you really only develop that skill with experience. So my first PRS match was 2013, and it was part of a TV show we were filming at the time. And so I met my rifle and my scope and everything at the event the day before. So I mounted my scope, got it all zeroed up, and I thought, you know, I'm a Special Forces sniper team leader. I'm the man. I'm gonna stroll up in this place and you know, I'll definitely finish in the top 10. I giggle saying it now because it's ridiculous, but I was like, oh, you know, I'll get a top 10 finish. I finished like dead in the middle, like right smack in the middle. And I remember talking to a gentleman named Wade Studeville, who is a super good dude and like the godfather of the PRS, still heavily involved in it. And Wade kind of came sauntering over and said, hey, what you got there? And it was a bolt action 223 with 5-round mags. And he laughed and he goes, you'd have jumped 10 places just by moving to a 6.5, one of the 6.5 cartridges. And he was right. That was the match that set the hook, because it's not just shooting, it's problem solving. You know, there's some striking similarities between the precision rifle series or National Rifle League, that type of shooting, and combat. And the name of the game in both is get stable and get hits fast. As much as everybody's like, well, you know, it's good YouTube videos, right? Some guy burning it down at the range, like, oh, he's shooting so fast. A lot of that footage is sped up, I might add. But he's shooting so fast, no, that looks amazing, and it's great TV. But if you don't hit what you aim at, then you got a noisemaker. And not only that, you just burn a ton of ammo that we could have really used later on. So between, you know, shooting on the PRS circuit and then, you know, working as a gun writer and doing some TV on the firearms industry, I feel really fortunate in that that's allowed me to really learn. The way I've described my job for the past 10 years is I'm a professional student. My job is to, you know, take widget X, learn as much about it as possible, and then pass that on. And that's really kind of the impetus behind Speedloads. Speedloads, the whole idea is, so what, right? There's a lot of YouTube out there, and there's a lot of great stuff of guys burning it down and looking cool and having fun at the range and some good range drills. But what the part that I really want to focus on is for the consumer at home that's thinking about spending their hard-earned money on something. Look, I'm going to take product X and explain, so what? Like, where does this fit in? What's its intended application? And does it meet that application? And the idea is, I want the video to look good, meaning you can see what I'm talking about, you can hear me, and then keep it fast and keep it short. Like, ain't nobody got time for 15 to 40 minute videos. Our target here is 3. So 3 minutes, hopefully you get a chuckle, hopefully you learn something, and then we're out.